closer. We're so damn far away.
Yeah, please
Everybody step
join
in.
me.
No, well.
Yeah, it's nice.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Governor Newsom, for your continued commitment to enhance our regional economy. My name is Jessica Anderson. I am the Chief Operating Officer of the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber is committed to making San Diego the most business-friendly region in California, a place where businesses can thrive while creating jobs. With Mexico being California's top exporting partner and San Diego home to the largest land commercial point of entry across the U.S. Mexico border, it is vital that our region remains globally competitive for trade and international supply chains that are a huge economic engine on both sides of the border. This is why the Chamber leads 3 annual delegations to Sacramento, Washington, D.C., and Mexico City to voice our regional business needs and advocate for issues important to the Cali-Baja region. We thank state leaders who join us on these delegation trips, including our governor, our lieutenant governor, and GoBiz, among others. At the Chamber, we stand by the belief that we aren't just trading with Mexico, but we are producing together. In the Cali-Baja region, there is a $270 billion regional GDP, and the region is a conduit for roughly $70 billion in cross-border trade. Our region has the largest medical cluster in the world, and at least 60,000 people cross our border daily for work. In fact, every 2 jobs created in Baja supports the creation of 1 job in San Diego. Our economies are truly intertwined. Otay Mesa East Land Port of Entry would facilitate trade and travel across the border as our region loses $2 billion in economic output due to border wait times. Furthermore, Sandag has conducted a study that has projected imports by truck to be equivalent to levels expected in 2032. To ensure the future economic prosperity of our region and the state, it is vital that we continue to support the completion of Otay Mesa East Port of Entry. Continuing partnership with the state of California is fundamental to strengthening global competitiveness and economic prosperity that supports our business community and workforce. I'd like to turn it over now to my partner, Nakia Clark, from the World Trade Center, San Diego.
Thank you, Jessica, and good afternoon, everyone. Honored to be here today, welcoming Governor Newsom to our border region. My name is Nakia Clark. I'm Executive Director of World Trade Center San Diego, which is part of our Economic Development Corporation. And here in the border region, global competitiveness and economic development go hand in hand, because when we create jobs, it matters a lot how we connect to the region around us and how we connect to our partners just across the border. So all the economic development work that we do in this region, we strive to do binationally. As Jessica mentioned, we advocate together in D.C. and in Mexico City around priorities, especially infrastructure priorities that impact the economy here. We go on binational trade missions to Korea, to Singapore, to the U.K., to France, to advocate for investment into this region on both sides of the border. And our team works every day with companies, helping them deepen and expand their supply chains in the binational region, which makes the entire United States a lot more competitive. So these are very uncertain times for businesses of every size, and we've been here before. We've learned how to navigate uncertainty, certainly. And here in the border region, we come back to what we know to be true about how the economy functions here. We know that what we do here is not trade, it is co-production. We produce things together. When we think about medical devices or electronics or automobiles, those components might cross the border 3, 4, 5, 8 times before they reach their final customer. And so 40% of what we import from Mexico every day is actually American made in the first place. That's how integrated we are in terms of our binational supply chains. We also know that U.S. competitiveness in critical industries is really reliant on these cross-border supply chains. 60% of all medical devices that treat patients in hospitals from Atlanta to Boston are manufactured and produced here and come through that port of entry every day. So facilitating goods back and forth and business connectivity is really important. And finally, we know that 98% of exporters, of American exporters, are small and mid-sized businesses. And when And when it is difficult to navigate, when things are uncertain, that disproportionately impacts small businesses that can't afford to have a supply chain on every continent. They're really reliant on understanding both their customer and their partners in the binational region. So because we know all these things, we know how to work together. And as we look to the future, here in the San Diego region, we've been finding solutions for decades around infrastructure, working with our partners across the border to make sure that we anchor the supply chains of the future. And it's critical for the United States and for the world that we continue to do that. Thank you very much. And I'm happy now to introduce my colleague, Eduardo Acosta from R.L. Jones Group.
Thank you very much. Buenas tardes a todos. Voy a hablar en español estamos en una región fronteriza. Para mí es un honor estar aquí representando a la Cámara de Comercio de San Diego y a la industria binacional. Estamos a unos pasos aquí de la Garita 2 que esperemos que pronto se pueda abrir. ¿Y por qué la necesitamos? Es muy importante para esta región poder contar con otra garita para fortalecer la relación. Tenemos años fortaleciendo esta región binacional de manufactura, de importaciones, exportaciones. La cadena de suministro en esta región es muy importante y sabemos muy bien que si se impone algún impuesto a los bienes que cruzan esa frontera de México para Estados Unidos, va a ser de gran impacto para todo el avance que se ha hecho. Es muy importante entender que esta región depende muchísimo de la colaboración entre los dos países, las dos regiones. No somos un país, no es una frontera, aunque está aquí una frontera obviamente, pero realmente como se trabaja en esta región, tenemos que ir trabajando equipo, tenemos una gran oportunidad para que en México y en Baja California se puedan manufacturar muchas más materias primas de lo que se ha hecho. Tenemos que traernos mucha de la manufactura de Asia para aquí, por esta región, para que seguir tomando ventaja del Tratado de Libre Comercio, poder aprovechar las oportunidades que tiene la dinámica que tenemos con Estados Unidos. México es el compañero de comercio número 1 de Estados Unidos y en lugar de ahorita ver maneras de cómo entorpecer esa relación, ese avance, tenemos que ver cómo trabajar en equipo y los dos gobiernos. Yo creo que va a haber presidente nuevo en México, que ya está, va a haber presidente nuevo en Estados Unidos y sabemos que van a colaborar y ver cómo esta región siga fortaleciéndose. Hay muchas empresas de electrónica, como han comentado, médica, mucho perecedero, mucho alimento que viene de México y empresas americanas lo importan y lo venden a todos los ciudadanos americanos. Entonces esta región, esta comunidad binacional tiene que seguir fuerte, tenemos que ir colaborando para poder tomar ventaja y creando puentes para otra garita, puentes para poder crecer juntos. Muchísimas gracias. Ahora es un honor presentarles al senador Steve Padilla.
Bienvenidos a todas y todos. Y Governor Newsom, my name is Steve Padilla. It's my honor to represent the 18th Senate District in the California State Senate. And we stand literally in the center of the Cali-Baja binational region, at a time of great promise and some peril. And I'm pleased to welcome the governor back again and to remind all of you that we're fortunate to have a strong voice here in this state, a strong leader, and a strong voice in Washington that we're going to need in the coming years. It's unfortunate that there still remains much to learn by so many about the unique and special value of the Cali-Baja region. We stand where two great cultures, great nations literally and physically come together and are intertwined every day. Our futures are so inextricably connected. The future of our workforce, the future of our common infrastructure, the ability to move goods and people, the ability to collaborate around innovation and production. This region where we stand today is critical to the North American export economy and to the well-being and economic prosperity of all Californians and indeed all Americans. Whether we talk about infrastructure, whether we talk about education, workforce development, clean air and clean water, the walls do not truly separate us when we seek to work collaboratively to solve those problems. We're going to need clear-eyed leaders who look at the precious international boundary between California and the United States and Mexico in 21st century terms, with clear-eyed, determined focus. And speaking of that, clear-eyed, determined focus and adult leadership, I am pleased to welcome back to this district and to this region our Governor, Governor Gavin Newsom.
Thanks, Senator. Thank you, Senator. Thank you to all our speakers, Jessica in particular, for her leadership and stewardship, setting the stage of time and place, and the Senator reinforcing the significance of this interdependence, this relationship, this mutuality that we share on the other side of the border and those here on this side of the border in the San Diego region. I'm back down here. We've been on a tour across the state, had the privilege of being in Fresno with former Mayor Swearengin, talking about our economic and workforce development strategy that's place-based, regional in its approach, a focus on building capacity in all of our diverse and unique regions across this state. It brought us to Bakersfield with Mayor Go a week ago, and down here today talking about the partnerships in this region, particularly in San Diego, in Imperial County, as part of this economic and workforce development strategy. I'll just remind people this strategy we initiated a year and a half or so ago, investing $5 million in developing place plans or plans that are unique to the distinctions that define the best of each region, the strengths and weaknesses identified. They were bolstered with $14 million of funding each region to move quickly on early projects, pre-development projects. And in January, there's $120 million of grant funding that is available for each of these 13 regions as it relates to expediting and moving some of their economic priorities forward. So this is something the state has never done. This is something that we've been working very closely with regions from the border, Redwood Coast, to here the southern border in Southern California. With that, let me just reference briefly. I just got off the phone as we were driving over with our State Office of Emergency. We've now put together what we refer to as our SOC. We've referred all our efforts to focus now on a 7.0 earthquake in Northern California. There was a tsunami warning that came out. That tsunami warning was lifted. It is part of a protocol, tsunami warnings, anytime you're 5.0 or greater around a coastal region, typically goes into effect. It allows us to back off through abundance of caution. That was lifted. Nonetheless, we're concerned about damage, particularly in the northern part of the state, in Del Norte and Mendocino, in Humboldt County. As a consequence of that, I just signed off on a state of emergency, a declaration that will allow us to provide more resources, provide some of our National Guard resources as needed, access to state fairgrounds, waiving some contractual obligations for that part of the state. It's another reminder of the state that we live in and the state of mind that we need to bring to our day-to-day reality here in the state of California in terms of being prepared for earthquakes. But early damage assessments are being made. We don't have any additional information at this time, but our teams are working collaboratively with the teams on the ground. And I just want to thank everybody, particularly our local law enforcement agencies, for their outstanding work and working through their protocols as quickly and efficiently as they have to date. And we'll have more to say on that over the course of the next few hours and clearly over the course of the next few days. Look, I came down here after a few days on the road, as I referenced in Fresno and Bakersfield, to really highlight the economic opportunities here in this region, but also to highlight this project that we've been talking about since the 1990s. We've been talking about this Otay East port of entry since quite literally the late 1990s. There have been formal efforts that date back to 2014 that codified a lot of that work with a memorandum of understanding with SANDAG and with Caltrans, the state of California, and our Mexican counterparts to move this project forward, to talk about the border in a different way, candidly, than it's often talked about as it relates to economic opportunities and that interdependence that we referenced a moment ago. We're finally here to make the announcement that we're going to be moving forward in the next few weeks. We've identified a contractor. We're going to be moving forward with building the roads right behind us to get down to this section of the border. And we are in the final phases, working very collaboratively with the White House and Mayorkas and the team, Homeland Security, to finally formalize our design contract and formally have that partnership agreement by the end of the month. That will allow us to move forward in January on this multi-year project that we hope to complete by December of 2027. This is a significant economic development opportunity. As I say, it's decades in the making. It's been a stubborn project for one reason and one reason alone, full disclosure, operational questions of how we manage this new port of entry and the funding that comes from actively managing it. And that's the process that is unfolding in real time as it relates to the details of this final agreement that we're working with the White House. We put out a statement today with Mayorkas, joint statement between the state and our federal partners. That's the first time we've been able to get to this point to more formalize or more formally advance the formalized agreements. But again, the key date's going to be the end of this month as we work on the details to get the final funding moving forward. But that's not stopping Caltrans. They've identified some contractors. You're going to start seeing the earth movers out here. You're going to start finally seeing things take shape and things happening. So this is a good news project. A long time, as I say, decades in the making, and I think paints a different picture than a lot of the pictures that are painted as it relates to border conversations in this country. Just briefly on that, there's a reason you see our men and women in uniform behind me, my left, in front of you. I'm really proud of the work the National Guard's done down here. You know, for many years now, we've had hundreds and hundreds of National Guards men and women supported by the state of California, the general fund of the state of California, doing work to support CBP on counter narcotics, specifically around fentanyl, but not exclusively around fentanyl. Those counter narcotics efforts led by the National Guard, just in 2023, they were successful in seizing 62,000 pounds statewide of fentanyl. I've seen firsthand this operation at 5 ports of entry along the border, about 70 National Guard men and women at each of these ports of entry, producing exceptional results. They have been embraced enthusiastically by our Border Patrol, and they've provided the kind of resourcefulness that only the National Guard can provide. Today we're announcing we're going to increase that operation and focus not just on the existing flow coming north into the state of California, into the United States, but looking at the flow going south, particularly as it relates to illicit money and as it relates to weapons. A big part of what happens on the other side of the border as it relates to violence is happening with American-made weapons that come south to Mexico from America. And we need to do a better job to attach a focus of responsibility and energy in that space. There have been good things that have been happening already with the National Guard. We're going to be expanding that with our intelligence gathering operations, analytics work that the National Guard is known for, and we're excited about that announcement today as well. Third, we're also more publicly announcing, or at least formalizing, at least a public understanding that we have applied with the State Department to formalize a National Guard partnership very similar to the one we have in Ukraine. Many of you may not know this. The beginning of the war in Ukraine, President Zelensky, been out in California even prior to the war, was highlighting the partnership between the state of California, our National Guard, and the work they were doing to help train and support the military in Ukraine. We want to build on that partnership with Mexico. And we have formalized that application. It's already in with the State Department to begin the process of approvals that will allow us to build on these existing partnerships that are well established for years with our National Guard and formalize it and scale it to the next level as it relates to what's happening north and south of the border wall you see behind me. So that's the third announcement that we wanted to share with you today as well. And finally, I'd be remiss because it goes to the subtext of what you heard from our speakers. There's no state that will be impacted more and has been already impacted more by this tariff conversation, this tax conversation that the president-elect is having. The impact's already being felt. We have seen the benefits of the USMCA as it relates to nearshoring. We've seen the benefits of these partnerships, and we have seen the economic output that has been extraordinary. That momentum, particularly as it relates to the diversification of supply chains, particularly as it relates to those relationships in China, that is now stubbornly in question as it relates to the impacts of a proposed 25% tax or tariff on goods coming from Mexico. That would lead, as an example, don't take my word for it, any objective analysis, upwards of you having to spend $3,000 more to purchase a car coming from Mexico if that tariff is indeed imposed. It begs the question, is the president-elect embarrassed by his own leadership as it relates to what he often describes as his USMCA? Did he do something wrong with that agreement that now he wants to throw it out completely and impose 25% tax increase on the American people? No state more impacted by that, no region more impacted by that. Small businesses that will lose customers, jobs that will be lost, the inflationary impacts on every single one of you, the cost of food that will go up, cost of tomatoes at the supermarket, the vegetables, over half that come in from Mexico, the impacts of retaliatory trade on the ag community. No state more impacted by the retaliatory impacts than the state of California. Just consider a simple fact that this ag export-dependent industry in the great state of California, that 43% of just 3 products exported around the world, almonds and dairy, pistachios, you can add walnuts into that, they will be impacted significantly. And those farmers, ranchers, will be impacted disproportionately if these tariffs go into effect. And I didn't even bring up the mass deportation components of it. You know better than I do. When you look at farm workers, the last estimate, roughly half are undocumented. Close to 90% have been in the state for years and years and years. They're not going back and forth. Close to 60% have kids. The impacts of mass deportation on the cost of food in this state, in this nation, are off the charts. This is serious business. And so I just want to highlight that as well. No state more impacted. Construction industry. Nationwide, we estimate 13% of the folks out there are undocumented. We know in states like California, it's significantly higher. The impact to housing costs. This is serious business. And so this is a serious moment in California's history, the region that defines Baja in California, the dynamism that's been well established here as it relates to co-creation, creativity, the entrepreneurial spirit that's defined between the two regions, north and south, but also as it relates to the impact on the American people and families all across this nation. Final word, don't think for a second this won't impact you. 90% of these tariffs will impact bottom of our economic chain, meaning lower wage workers that pay over half of these taxes. So this is a regressive tax that will have a profound impact on progress and momentum that we're starting to enjoy in the tentpole of the American economy. $3.89 trillion a year economy. There is no economic growth in America without the success and the vibrancy of this region and the state of California. 71%, by the way, of America's output are happening in blue counties, that seem to be under assault, at least rhetorically, by the president-elect. Forgive me, I didn't want to make this too political. And I know there's a lot of mixed status here as it relates to different points of view politically. But I hope we can all agree the impacts on this region and your pocketbook will universally be felt regardless of your politics. That's a betrayal that needs to be revealed to those that embraced and supported this agenda. That betrayal is taking place in real time. You are being betrayed by these policies. The impact exists now, even before these tariffs have been imposed. That's not something you should take my word for it. I just met with leaders in the business community that said already the momentum has been impacted as it relates to nearshoring in anticipation with the uncertainty of these tariffs. So that is the final commentary in these long-winded remarks. But I feel very passionate about this because I care about this state. We care about border security, but we also care about economic security, and we care about two-way trade, and we care about our partners on the other side of this border that have well-established partnerships. And I'll just say one final word. I had the privilege, and Jessica, thank you for being here, to be with the former mayor of San Diego on a trade mission with the San Diego Chamber of Commerce in Mexico with hundreds of business leaders. And it's always nice to be back here to be reminded that we have enlightened leaders, regardless of political stripes, in the business community that understand the stakes of the debate and the stakes of the conversations we're having all across this country. With that, we're happy to answer any questions. And if they could be on this topic, then we can have folks behind me, including Dee Dee Myers, my economic development czar, answer them. And if they're not, we'll let them go because I don't want you all to be stuck here.
Governor, given the balance that you're trying to strike here between economic development and trade and border security, do you expect to see the Trump administration cooperate with you on projects like this one when they come into power in January?
Well, he helped. He's one of the supporters going back 2018. Some of the efforts under the Trump administration allowed us to make progress incrementally on this project specifically. So I hope they'll consider their own imprint as it relates to this project, and I hope they'll continue to support it, recognizing the economic imperative of doing so. It's in the interest of the American people, it's the interest of this region, interest of this state, but it's the interest of the U.S. economy, absolutely.
And on mass deportations, obviously there have been some lawmakers in California who have said that there should be no cooperation with the Trump administration. As governor, are there any instances in which you expect to direct state resources to cooperate with the Trump administration?
Well, our approach has been consistent. We don't interfere with federal right to advance federal laws with federal resources. As it relates to the rules that are well defined in the state of California, going back to the previous gubernatorial administration and legislative agendas, we cooperate in many cases. Other cases, there is a requirement of cooperation based on certain criteria and conditions. And we abide by those rules and that engagement and that protocol have consistently. So that's the approach we take. Again, not a closed fist as it relates to these issues, an open hand. But again, co-opting local law enforcement to make them federal immigration is not something consistent with the law of the state of California. It was upheld by the federal courts not too many years ago by the Trump administration that tried to assert that that was an unconstitutional act, SB 54. Turns out, on the basis of their actions and the federal court's adjudication, that it indeed is not.
Thank you.
Hello, Governor. There's a lot of frustration on both sides of the border over the continued delays of the Otay project, and I'm wondering whether it was supposed to open this year, and now we're being told 2028. I'm wondering whether any of the announcements, the pending agreement, the work that's going to start, will that expedite the opening date? Do you have a new date that we could?
Well, I gave you the date, and I'm giving you December 2027. Sounds better than January 2028. And I'm here to jumpstart this. I'm with you. Let me express my own frustration with this. And we've been very active. Tijuana River been active on a lot of border issues in the last many years, but particularly in the last few months. In the remaining months of the Biden administration. And so we want to lock as many of these things up as we can in terms of commitments and meet these timelines. So we're going to hold them to the timeline at the end of December, get this agreement. I'm going to be held to account as it relates to our obligations at the state level, as it relates to Caltrans work and getting this contractors to start on the road construction. And we're going to try to keep all our feet to the fire as it relates to SENDAG's component, their responsibilities as it relates to meeting that December 2027 deadline as well.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Governor Jim Avila from ABC San Diego. My question is, as you know, elections have consequences. Donald Trump won the election. There was quite a bit of criticism from Democrats during the Biden administration when Texas attempted to take over the immigration rules. Shouldn't those same criticisms be for California when California attempts to take over and stop deportations?
Well, I don't.
Like that?
I mean, it's a hypothetical. So I imagine in that hypothetical situation, one would be open to a criticism along those lines. But you're expressing, again, a hypothetical. It's not an evidence. I just told you, as it relates to the last question or question two prior, that California's posture remains. The federal government, we do not interfere in the federal government's right to enforce federal law using federal resources, period, full stop. We also have a legal obligation to abide by the law in the state of California that, as I said, was upheld by the Ninth Circuit. And we intend to do just that as well. So as it relates to a hypothetical, we'll have to address that if indeed that transpires. But I think our approach is one that's sound and thoughtful.
Doesn't it mean, though, that you would have to cooperate with deportation? And you said you won't.
Well, I've not said that. So forgive me if you've quoted me, or rather forgive you if you've quoted me. As it relates to cooperation, it's well established. And I encourage you to take a look. It's complicated. SB 54, no one suggesting it's not. I'll give you an example. As governor of the state of California, I'm responsible for the California Department of Corrections, federal state prison. The state of California cooperates with ICE as it relates to people that have completed their sentences, and there is a handover to ICE as it relates to deportation. That's just one specific fact that's well in evidence in the state of California as it relates to the role and responsibility of the executive branch vis-a-vis state prisons. As it relates to the state law, going back to 2014, that was upheld again by the federal courts not too many years ago, there's nuance as it relates to local law enforcement and what they can or cannot do as it relates to convictions for violent or serious felonies, or convictions that likely would impose state prison or judicial warrants. I can go down further nuance and list, and there's different requirements as it relates to local jails and local law enforcement and what they can or cannot do vis-a-vis deportation and cooperation and collaboration with ICE. And again, those are well-established protocols that have been in effect. The ability to interview people that are incarcerated is well-established and continues in the state of California. Judicial warrant, you can actually coordinate and collaborate with federal authorities as it relates to transportation. So all of these things, I encourage folks, it's not black and white. Don't fall prey to what you see on TV all the time or the press that want to make this, it shouldn't be easy on folks. There's nuance here. And that nuance is well established in California, and I hope I've established some criteria of consideration as it relates to some of that nuance for you to consider.
Hello. So I don't know if this is part of the pending agreement with the federal government, but is there any commitment by DHS to have this new port of entry fully staffed? Because that has been a problem with the current.
That's the negotiation. It's the current negotiation. It's the heart of the negotiations that are ongoing and we anticipate conclude by the end of this month.
And another question. You mentioned the National Guard will expand operations for southbound operations. Can you just clarify what is that going to look like for the people that go back and forth?
Well, and as it relates to that, we're building on existing operations. We have, I think, about 6 versions of. Well, you know what? You got that damn head of the National Guard here. We might as well take advantage of this.
How are you, sir? Good to see you, sir. Thank you for being here.
So, yeah, let me touch on that just briefly. We're not going to talk about it in any great detail, given the operational security concerns we would have on an operation like that. However, like the governor said, this builds on the existing capacity and capability that we're already delivering to a variety of federal, state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies across California, not just along the border, but up and down the entire state. So what we intend to do is enable existing law enforcement task forces to do a better job of interdicting guns and money heading south. We have a duty and responsibility, at least in my mind, to do that work better than we're currently doing it. We have broad support across the law enforcement community to support their efforts to do that.
Well said.
Hi, Governor. My name is Marina Zavala. I'm news reporter for Telemundo in San Diego. Can you tell us, well, I'm very happy to see you with the Senator Steve Padilla because just yesterday he spoke to us about the importance of this binational problem with the water. So my question is, why the state of California didn't ask for a state of emergency? Why didn't declare it while the city of Imperial Beach requests so many times? They have their beach closed for more than 1,000 days. Why not say yes to a state of emergency?
Because it would have meant nothing. It would have frustrated people because it, as the form and substance of fog as it relates to having any meaning, it would have been just a statement backed up by nothing. What we've done is we've gone back over and over and over again to Washington, D.C., and we've been successful getting now $453 million, getting hundreds of millions of dollars in the current budget that's being debated. And I've been, as you know, on the other side of the border, on this side of the border, active in engaging to get to this solution that all of us desire to see on this federal responsibility, and also holding our friends in the southern part of the border to theirs, which it appears they're making tremendous progress. And I want to applaud the governor, Baja, for the work she's done specifically in this respect. So that's the substance. The rest was symbolism. And so we've said that 100 times, but it's become a thing. And I get it. Often that's the case. But states of emergency as it relates to the one that we advanced today as it relates to earthquake are very finite in terms of what they can and cannot do. And they connect to well-established protocols as it relates to access of federal funds. What we were calling for, what some were calling for on this, would not have availed us to any real benefit except symbolism and then ultimately frustration that it didn't mean anything. What's meant something is action by your congressional representatives, by the senator and others, and by the White House, who's directly been engaged on multiple visits. And I say directly, I mean the chief of staff on down. They recognize the imperative, and they've been working hard to secure those dollars the last couple of years.
So just to confirm, declaring the state of emergency didn't bring more resources, more millions of dollars here?
And not a dollar. Yeah, in fact, we've added about $40 million from the state independent general fund, and we continue to provide resources from the general fund as it relates to air quality monitoring and other things. But the substantive, the real money, the IBWC, the money that comes from the federal obligations responsibilities, that $353 million that's been locked in, 103 last year, 150 the prior year, and then the money that's currently being debated and appropriated, a few hundred extra million dollars, will get us to the goal in terms of the big projects that we just announced a few weeks ago, as you know, in a big press conference down at the border.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Governor. I just have a quick question. Tariffs have been a huge topic of conversation, and this looks like an economic gateway to that continuous conversation. I want to ask you, what do you feel is still maybe the misunderstanding the public has in terms of how this tariff will impact their daily lives?
They don't know what tariff means. I asked 9 out of 10 people, what's a tariff? They say, I said, no, what is it? Tariff's a tax that you pay for. It's not even complicated. This is one of the biggest tax increases in U.S. history that this guy, Donald Trump, just proposed. That's a hell of a thing. Yeah. And that is disproportionately impacts you. Impacts the cost of oil and petroleum. You're upset about costs of oil? It directly impacts the cost of oil. Impacts the cost of medical drugs. Impacts the cost of food. It's a tax that you pay for. And you know what? Most regressive tax that exists and the modest revenue it generates is to offset a massive tax cut for billionaires and corporations. That's what he's proposing. You can't make this up. And he's proposing it on 2 partners, Canada and Mexico, that he just advanced a partnership with a few years ago, the USMCA. They did the exact opposite, where there were no tariffs, no taxes. And that's allowed the dynamism and allowed the economic development and lowered costs. So this has an inflationary impact. And again, there's people on the left and the right, they universally say it. He's just stuck in old mice. I wish he would, I was just watching a great old video of Ronald Reagan educating the world about tariff policy. I wish he were still alive to educate the president-elect. But he couldn't be more wrong. Targeted tariffs, I'm not naive here about how they can be used effectively. But in this notion that everybody's going to start onshoring, we're going to start producing bananas in America? We're going to start producing coffee in America? No, those are simple taxes that you'll pay for, that everybody watching will pay for, and the impacts are pretty alarming.
Governor Salvador Rivera, Border Report, Fox 5 here in San Diego. I'm the last one. Go get you out of here. So
those are always the most dangerous.
All right, I'm going to change the subject a little bit.
See,
I want your thoughts.
I knew it, brother.
I want your thoughts on what happened a month ago today. What went wrong? How did Democrats get shown the door so badly? What would you have done differently than perhaps Ms. Harris or Mr. Walz did not do?
I appreciate it, and I hope you can appreciate if I appear a little political, it's because I'm intentionally trying to be by not answering your question. And what I mean by that is I'm with Jon Stewart, who wisely said, be patient. What happened will be revealed. And it won't be revealed in the hours and days and weeks and even months after an election. That will absorb a deeper understanding over time. And that's the approach I'm taking. I wrote out, I'm not making this up, there's about 6 pages I have in notes. There's my mother and dad's grave in the car of everybody's punditry that completely contradicts everyone else's punditry about what happened. And I did that purposely for my own absorption and edification, that it will reveal itself. I don't have a clear answer to it, and so as a consequence, I won't attempt to answer it.
Just can you tell the Hispanic community, especially in the border towns, how is it the role of the National Guard that is going to be the criminal, stopping the
100%, yeah.
but not the other side?
Yeah, no. Yeah, no, look, since 2022, November 2022, we've had 392 National Guards men and women doing extraordinary work that has not in any way, shape, or form created any kind of anxiety or impacted the community in the state of California outside the focused efforts on counter-narcotics and addressing the issue of drugs on our streets and our drugs all across the state, and have helped absorb some of the burdens placed upon Border Patrol as it relates to lack of staffing at ports of entry. So this is a consistent operation that we want to maintain, and then the expansion of that will just be focusing on issues related to illicit money coming south and weapons of war that often come from states, neighboring states, less from the state of California, but come through the border to Mexico. So don't fear that the expansion of the National Guard is inconsistent with the past practices and policies. But I do want to just close on this. If you were the last two final questions, I'll make this the last final point. It's frustrating to me. You have a president, it goes to the question about operations and the lack of funding from the federal government to fund the appropriate level of staffing for asylum judges, for border patrol, fill in the blank. And that was all presented just a few months ago as an opportunity to actually resolve and address. And President Trump called the Speaker of the House and told him not to do it. The hypocrisy here is so extraordinary. And it's an Orwellian thing that they can spin all of this and somehow mislead people into thinking they have your back on a lot of these issues. So I do hope we get the resources for CBP, for Otay Mesa East. We're working with the Biden administration to advance that, but it has to be codified certainly by the Trump administration. And I hope they come to their senses on tariffs. I hope they come to their senses on looking at the border not just as a cudgel, but looking at the border as many people do down here from an economic perspective and looking at broadening the rhetoric as it relates to what's happening all across this country, but particularly here in one of the most dynamic economic regions anywhere in the world. With that, we're thankful all of you took the time to be out here. Thank you, guys.